Good evening. I'm Terry Ziegler. I'm the school board president. Tonight is, as you all know, is a listening session. There's no board action that's going to happen tonight, but it is a posted meeting, and since it is, I'm going to ask all of you to join me in the pledge. Rise, the flag is behind you, and we'll say the pledge before we get started. I pledge allegiance Thank you. So this is a listening session that is intended for our advisory committee and in particular our school board members to hear what you have to say about two options that are being considered and presented tonight. So before we start, in case you don't know, I'm going to ask the school board members to stand so you know who they are and they can introduce themselves. So if you guys would and gals would stand up, please, and accommodate the school board members, please. Yes. And since I have the mic, this is Paul Lorge in front of me, our treasurer. Mark Kaler to my left. In the back is Clayton Riddle. That's the three people that comprise our facilities ad hoc committee, out of which our facilities advisory committee grew. Joe Mell, Dan McKelvey, and Julia McNally, all present as well. Thanks. So that is the task tonight, is to present these two options. A couple of different people are going to present to you different facets of those options, and then at the end of that time we'll have a time for questions, and that'll be probably about half an hour at the end. This is being recorded, just so you know. People can watch this at a later date. If you have something to say tonight and would like to say it publicly, there's a microphone here. Just please state your name and your address so we know who you are and where you are in the district, and use the mic since it is going to be recorded and it's a big crowd. So without any further ado, I'm going to present Jeff Nelson, our superintendent. He'll take the next step.
Thanks, Terry. Hopefully all of you, as you came in, you grabbed two different handouts. One is the handouts that you're going to see tonight of the presentations, and it's sort of hard to see up on the screen, so the handout will help you with that. And the other is this goldenrod sheet that is a feedback opportunity for you to give us feedback. So the idea tonight is for us to present the options that the Facilities Advisory Committee has been researching, and for you to give us feedback on that. You can either write in this form and drop it off at the end of the night, or there's also a SurveyMonkey link that you can do either at home or on your phone or wherever you'd like to do that. So there's two options, but we do hope that you'll give us some kind of feedback about those options. So I started here on July 1st, and so for me, it was an opportunity to find out, okay, what have we done in the past with our facilities, and what are the drivers? Why did you look at going to a referendum last April, and why are we still looking at a referendum and looking at our facility needs in that sense? And so, some of these pieces that we talked about was that the first one was that Grafton Elementary School was really the catalyst for this discussion. It's in need of immediate replacement. There's some studies that's been made, and Paul will talk about that, versus repairing versus replacing. And so that's what sort of drove the idea of why are we looking at a referendum now? Because in 3 years we have debt coming off from the 2000 referendum. So it would, you were like, well, why aren't you waiting till that's off? Well, that's because we're in a spot where we can't wait. We need to do something so that our students are in a school that is going to be able to survive winters and so forth. So we're trying to be proactive in a problem that we know that we have. And as we do that, because some people would say, well, why don't you just build a new elementary school? Why wouldn't you just take your elementary students and make the other two elementaries bigger and then just call it a day? We also wanted to take an opportunity. One of the drivers is to look at how can we gain some efficiencies in our district. How can we gain some budget efficiencies so that long-term we can long-term plan, as well as how can we build collaboration with our teachers, and should we be looking at a K-12 or a pre-K-12 discussion instead of like let's go to the public for a referendum and then we're going to come back in 10 years. That was never, that's not a driver that we have. We want to say, how can we, now is the time to take a look at our system. How can we make our system the best possible that it is? And we also need to improve safety and security at each building. We have secure entrances. We have safety at each of our buildings. Is it as efficient as it can be? No. There are ways for us to do it more efficiently. That requires a remodel and a budget that goes with that. We also need to create learning spaces that are flexible for growth. We all know that what we learned, how we learned in school is different than how students are learning now. And so we need to make sure that we have spaces that are flexible and also are flexible for growth. So if our district does grow, can we add on without having to go to referendum? Are we building things that are able, instead of having brick walls that is expensive to tear down, are we building it in a different way that allows for different types of uses in that sense? And an example of that is our science facilities. So those haven't been updated since 1971. And in my mind, that's some of you, like that's a long time. Some of you, that isn't a long time. I was born in 1971, so that seems like a long time ago. But those haven't been updated since then. And it's hard to believe that. And if you take a tour of the high school, you would see that. We've added Project Lead the Way biomedical science. We know the science field is growing. That's a field that is going to continue to grow as our population ages. We've added this in 2013 and 14. And you can see in 2013-14, we had 102 students enrolled out of about 760 students at the high school. And now you can see 3 years later, we're offering 4 different classes, and you have 140, 160, 170, 182 students being involved in our Project Lead the Way biomedical facility. We're using old science classrooms and trying to utilize them for that way to do the best thing possible. But it's definitely something that needs to be improved, and it's something that will help students as they look at careers as they leave Grafton High School. Also, we looked at our tech ed facilities. We know that manufacturing is a big thing in our community, and this is something that we're very proud of, how well our autos department does in various competitions, whether it's locally or at the state level or nationally. We value the fact that we are able to offer metals and woods, and so we wanted to say, how can we need to upgrade those facilities. Those facilities haven't been touched. They need to be upgraded. They've done some added curriculum. They added some STEM curriculum. You can see the different courses that they've added, Introduction to Engineering and Principles of Engineering. Then the last 2 years, you have 57 students that are now engaged in those classes. So we're seeing a need to upgrade in that area as well. Another lever for us, another driver for us, was really making sure that our students with cognitive disabilities, some of our most fragile students, are in classrooms and in spaces that are suitable for their needs, that respect their privacy, that allow them to be also a part of our learning community and safe in that sense. And then also increasing that handicap accessibility. A lot of our buildings aren't ADA compliant, and so being able to bring that up to code is also important to us. One of the things that we talked about was that a 612, if we're going to look at a 612 option, which is one of the options that you'll see, is more efficient than a 712 option because at the middle school, 6th grade is where you start having electives. So if you had a 712 building, then it wouldn't be efficient because you'd be having to provide specials at each building in that 6th grade level, and they'd be singletons and all by themselves, where in a 612 building, they're able to share some of those resources. A 6-8 building, you're able to share those resources, but a 712 building wasn't as efficient in that sense. And then also, the Village of Grafton for the last 3 years has done surveys. The town that we don't have data from the town, but we do have Village of Grafton surveys, which show that people choose Grafton as a community to live in because of a strong school system. And you can see in 2013 that was the #1 reason why people chose. 2014 it's the #1 reason, and 2015 it's the #3 reason. So we know that a strong school system needs to be in place for there to be a strong community. And there needs to be a strong community in place for there to be a strong school system. As parents, we know that we need great teachers, but we also need parents who are engaged in that process, and we need students who are engaged in that process. And the same thing applies with a school system. We need to have the community engaged and realizing the benefit of a school system. The return on investment is one that helps us with our property values. Having a strong school system increases property values and makes it more desirable for people to move into the community, which is why you see in the last 3 years that being #1 for 2 and then the top 3 this past year. So that's also a driver for us as we look at change in that sense. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul Lorge, who is the head of our Facilities Advisory Committee, and he'll talk to us a little about the process that we followed.
Thanks, Jeff. Just want to touch base quickly. There's a lot up here in writing, a lot in writing on the following slides about the process that we've gone through over the years relative to planning for our facilities. We've been dealing with space issues and maintenance issues for a long time. In fact, in 2008, 2009, there was a 4K study that was done that identified space constraints in a number of the buildings. We wrestled with those for a number of years. In 2011, actually, under Dr. Pachura's time here and Mr. Riddle's insistence, we really put forward in earnest an effort to identify what are our facilities needs. And in fact, we spent most of the time throughout 2012, the early part, we engaged Plunkett Rasick architects, and we engaged Kapoor and Associates to come in and do an assessment of all of our facilities, top to bottom, all of the maintenance items, all of the infrastructure and the elements. They issued their reports in July of 2012. Those reports identified more than $20 million of maintenance needs that were identified as A, B, and C, or short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Throughout 2013 and 14, we addressed the most pressing of those needs. In fact, over the last 5 years or so, we've addressed about 3.5 million of those. Some of that coming from a borrowing, some of that coming from fund balance, and some of that, 1.5 million or so, coming out of just general operations. We knew that at that point in time, more work had to be done, so we actually went out and engaged the architectural community with a request for proposal to help us get deeper and dig deeper into our facilities needs. We had a number of architects that came in, replied to that request for proposal, and from there we were able to engage the services of Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction. They came in and did their own initial assessment. After that work was done and recognizing continued needs, the first Grafton Facilities, Citizens Facilities Committee was formed. Consisted about 50 members. Those members were selected by the superintendent at the time, and they met from April of 2015 all the way through to October or so. During that time, they explored 10 options. 10 options were considered, and they ranged from just taking care of the maintenance items, roughly $20 million, to an option for $60 million that built the new middle school at the GES site, and it actually included a new elementary school at the Kennedy site. From those 10 options, the board selected one option. That was the option that was presented in April of 2016, the 2016 referendum. 2 questions. First question was for $47.5 million. That addressed all of the maintenance needs at all of the facilities. It built the new 7th and 8th grade middle school at the current GES site. It converted Kennedy Elementary School and Woodview Elementary School into primary schools that would house 4K to 2nd grade. And it converted John Long Middle School into an elementary school to house the 3rd through 6th graders. That was question 1, $47.5 million. The second question, $1.8 million, was money that was set aside to replace or upgrade outdoor athletic facilities. Of course, the reason we continue to be here today, further study, is that referendum didn't pass. The first question failed 45 to 55, and the second question failed 48 to 52. The outcome of the referendum, however, didn't make the needs go away. The needs were still there. So regardless of that vote, the board had to sit down and determine what are we going to do next. We needed to find an alternative solution. Jeff hit it earlier. One of the critical pieces in this whole thing was the viability of GES. So at that point in time, the first thing we did was we engaged the Sigma Group to come in and do an in-depth study of GES. So between the Sigma Group and our own internal resources, a study was done of that facility, a report was issued, and the conclusion of that report was that the costs necessary to bring that up to a viable building rivaled that of a new building. We had to look further. And as a result of looking further, the first ad hoc facilities committee of the board was formed. In June of last year, or June of this year, actually, that's now we're in this year, that ad hoc facilities committee, identified earlier, held 5 listening sessions throughout the community to better understand what about that first referendum? What didn't you like? What's working? What's not working? What are the things that we should consider? In addition, over the summer, the board, by virtue of a new law that was passed in 2013, created a Fund 46. One of the things that we heard is we needed to make sure that we had money set aside for maintenance into the future. Fund 46 is a vehicle that was created by law in 2013 that allows us to put money aside. Can't use it for 5 years, but we can put money aside from surpluses each year to be available for these maintenance types projects. We had to create a 10-year capital plan, which we did, and we had to fund that account, which we've done. We initially put $1 in that account. We added to that $360,000 last fiscal year. We've got a plan or a line item in our budget this year to add $100,000. And each year we'll make a determination whether from the surplus funds more should be added to that account. But our goal is to have $1 million in that account 5 years from now when it's available for use. After those listening sessions and based upon all of the notes, the Ad Hoc Facilities Committee said, we need to look deeper. They recommended to the board that a new committee be formed, a Facilities Advisory Committee, be formed to continue to study what our opportunities and challenges were. And this time, rather than selecting that committee, we went through an application process. 2 simple questions. Are you interested in serving? Why? What are your qualifications to serve? We asked people to put that information out there so that we could get a cross-section of folks from the community, those that supported the referendum, those that didn't support the referendum, those had experience in the trades, those had experience in education, those had experience in financing, and all the gamut. 55 people applied. We selected 20 members from those 55 at large. In addition, 8 staff members joined that committee as well as 3 board members. So a committee of 30 people that began meeting in August of this year. This is the committee. And I'd ask that if you're here, if you wouldn't mind standing so you can be recognized. On behalf of the board, thank you all very much for the work that you've done. We've been meeting roughly every other week or so. The meetings have ranged from 2.5 to roughly 3 hours, and there's significant discussion of all of the elements of this project. Just real quick, what did we do at these meetings? Well, the first meeting, August 10th, we brought everybody up to speed. It's a new committee. Some had served on the previous committees, others had not. But we wanted to bring everybody up to speed on the project itself, on the options that were considered. As part of each of the meetings, we toured the facilities. That was something that was available for anybody on the committee. Take a walk. Let's see what the facilities are actually like. We looked at school finance basics and state aid basics so we can understand the impact of the decisions and the recommendations that were to come out. The second meeting that we had, one of the things that came out from the listening session is, well, what about that 2000 referendum? So we spent time talking about the April referendum, the 2000 referendum, where did that money go? What might, if we're going to make changes to facilities, have we gotten a good use out of those invested dollars from 2000 or not? Where is that money allocated? The third meeting we dedicated to communications. What things can we do to better communicate with the community, to share information that is being discussed, to gather additional ideas that might support a better project? Meetings 4, 5, and 6 were really centered around identifying options, identifying alternatives. What things can we consider? What are the options? And in fact, our last meeting, November 2nd, we zeroed in on the options that you're going to see tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jody Andres from Hoffman. He'll walk through the 2 options that the committee surfaced by virtue of its work.
Thanks, Paul. We're going to start with just a real broad overview of each of these options before we get into the diagrams that you have in front of you. We're going to follow the same order that your packets are in so you can follow right along. So the first one that we're talking about is called the 3-campus option. The 3 campuses that we're considering here are the Kennedy campus, the campus that we're on right now, John Long Middle School and Woodview Elementary, and then the high school campus. So in this solution, we're keeping all 3 of those campuses open and active. So what's happening to each of these facilities on a broad basis is Grafton Elementary, in this case, which is currently housing 2 sections, and when we say sections, we're just meaning 2 grades of each class. So there's 2 first grades, 2 second grades, 2 third grades, and so on. So right now, Grafton Elementary is holding 2 sections of early childhood 4K through 5th graders at the facility. In this option, we would consider deconstructing and reclaiming the site at where Grafton Elementary currently sits. Kennedy Elementary, again, is a 2-section 4K through 5. There currently is not room for early childhood or some of the other programs there. So those are happening at other facilities. So that's just 4K through 5. In this option, Kennedy Elementary would be a 3-section early childhood through 5th grade facility. In other words, half of your elementary school students in this option would be housed at Kennedy. Woodview Elementary currently has a 2-section early childhood through 5th grade. In this option, that would be the other half of your early childhood through 5th grade students. So every elementary school child in the district would go to either Kennedy or Woodview. So expansions would happen with both of those facilities to accommodate the extra students. In this option, John Long Middle School would, as it currently contains all of your 6th through 8th grade students, it would continue to house all of your 6th through 8th grade students without any changes in terms of the student configuration or capacity. Grafton High School in this option, again, it currently houses all your 9th through 12th graders. It would continue to house all your 9th through 12th graders, sorry. Also at the end here, you see one last piece. Whenever we consider, in either of these options, when we consider taking down Grafton Elementary, and if you're not aware of it, Grafton Elementary not only houses the district administration building, but it also houses all the district's maintenance functions. Basically on the northwest corner of that building, all the shops that Jamie Schofield has for district equipment, fixing, repairing, furnishings and stuff like that happen within that facility. So with Grafton Elementary School going away, we would have to construct basically a freestanding 7,100 square foot facility for district maintenance. That would be pretty much a very simple building. In both of these cases located somewhere within the Grafton High School site. So getting into each option, as we look at these and what you have shown on your handouts here, in the upper corner, or in some cases it's located in other places on the sheet, but you'll see a summary of what's happening at the facility from a number standpoint. So you'll see how much square footage is being added onto and how much square footage is being remodeled at each of these facilities. And then you'll also see the budgets for each of these. Backing up here, you do see that there is a total up at the top there, $44,977,540. That's all the work that we're going to talk about here in this 3-campus option go into that total. So you see that there's separate line item costs there broken out into very broad categories, admittedly. You have maintenance budgets, site budgets, remodeling budgets, addition budgets, and then the total budget. The maintenance is what Paul was talking about, the stuff that was identified back in 2012 that hasn't been accomplished yet. A portion of that, and this is where the Fund 46 that he was talking about starts to kick in. We took a look at the most immediate needs for maintenance at each of these facilities, and that's what we're really addressing when we look at the maintenance budget here. So you see the totals for that, about $9.5 million for this facility. Kennedy Elementary would get a significant addition to it to allow it to add that extra section of early childhood through 5th grade. Currently, just to orient yourself, the existing cafeteria is in the upper right-hand corner there. The addition would be towards the south end of the site. It would be a 2-story addition, making the most use of the site that you have there, the limited site that you have. The green boxes that you see there, the green areas, that's the addition. The white areas are existing building that nothing is happening to, and the hatched areas are areas that we're going to be remodeling. So broad concept, again, we're creating an early childhood or a lower age area in that wing where currently the kindergarten rooms actually exist right now. The library is being taken over to expand there. The existing gym that's at Kennedy would remain as a cafeteria. We would expand the kitchen there. So you see a little bit of an addition in the back there for basically just an expanded storage and serving area for that facility for the kitchen. remodeling the office area to include a better secure entry than what you have right now, addressing some of the special needs classrooms, and then in the addition, you have the music and art area kind of centrally located on the lower level, the media center located above that, again central to the new classrooms and the existing classrooms, and then at the end of the facility there would be a gymnasium. That's basically one competition court in size with seating for approximately 250 to 150 spectators along one side of that. Down below we have it shown as 5th grade, up above we have it shown as 4th grade classrooms. How individual grade levels actually end up is going to be obviously up for discussion, but what we're doing here is representing the quantity of classrooms. So you're sure you have enough, basically those 3 classrooms for every grade level, all the special needs areas, the offices and things that you see outside the library there are for special needs, paraprofessionals, the support staff that are at this facility to support the students in not only special needs but also programs like reading, math tutoring, those kind of things would also happen in those spaces. One of the other things that I will just quick point out is there are actually 2 toilet rooms on the lower level, 2 toilet rooms on the upper level. If you've ever been in Kennedy, you realize that that's one of the very significant shortcomings of that facility is they only have that one small toilet facility located central for the whole school. The next diagram is showing the site. One of the site challenges at Kennedy really has been we always like to try and segregate parent drop-off traffic and bus drop-off traffic. You can control bus drop-off and bus traffic. You can't necessarily control parent traffic. So we try and keep those separate to keep the site safe. So what we're thinking here is we're adding an additional drive through the site from north to south, utilizing some of the existing parking lot, but also creating a new access towards the south end of the site. We are going to, with all this extra pavement, we are going to have to do something with the stormwater, so there's a representative area for stormwater management. New playground, you can see the location of the proposed addition, the existing building, a new paved play area that can double as large event parking after and before school hours. But during the day that would obviously be used as playground space. We are expanding up towards the village tennis courts, some additional paved area for the additional staff parking it's going to be required at the facility. So the idea is that one drive would be used for bus drop-off and 5th Avenue would be used for parent drop-off. And again, just to explain a little bit more, the budgets, the numbers that you see on each of these for each option, for each building, they're the same numbers. We just wanted to be consistent. It's not an additive thing. It's just listing it again for your reference. Moving on to Woodview Elementary, again, we're looking at a 3K for early childhood through 5th grade. This one is pretty straightforward. There's some additional classrooms to the east being added on to accommodate the additional students. Again, the gymnasium in this case would become the commons, but also be a multi-purpose space, so it can be used for Phi Ed. And a new gymnasium would be built off to the west end. A new office main entry would be in that corner with some new kindergarten rooms up to the north end of that building. And then there's some remodeling internally to give some extra space to the art room, special needs, taking those central special needs rooms that are off the media center and actually giving them real walls instead of the half partition walls that they have right now. And then taking 3 classrooms and making it into some I believe that's kindergarten or 4K up there at the top. So again, about 10,000 square foot of renovations, 28,000 square foot of additions, and you see the budget there at about $9.6 million. On the site, we're actually going to look at both what happens for John Long Middle School site and Woodview because they are so closely tied. I think everyone who's ever been out by Woodview trying to pick up or drop off students or come during those busy times of the day will realize that that's one of the major safety issues at that site. So one of the main things that we're trying to do is off of 5th Avenue here, we are creating an additional drop-off site and additional parking off to the west of the building here. So it's along the left side of the page here on the west part of the site. You can see the addition for the gym and the classrooms off to the west and to the east. The other thing that we're trying to do here is parent drop-off for Woodview would be off of Fifth Avenue. Parent drop-off for John Long Middle would still be off of Hickory Street where it is right now. What we would be doing is creating a new bus drop-off between the two facilities that's segregated completely from the other traffic drives. Staff would still be for John Long on the east end of the building, but buses would come off of, is that 9th? Come off of that boulevard onto the site, circulate around, drop off the students, and then circulate back out the way that they came in. That can be gated to keep other people out during bus traffic or even during school hours. It could be gated up on the top so it can be opened up for large events, and that paved play area could be used for parking much like it is right now for either outdoor athletic events or events happening within the building. Now, one of the items that isn't shown on a diagram because we're not really changing much in this option is the building that we're in right now, John Long Middle School. You do see in the lower right-hand corner of your sheet there, it does talk about the fact that there are no renovations or additions there in terms of changing room use or major reconfigurations within the building. There's no additions. But there is about $2.3 million of maintenance items that would be happening at this facility. Again, those are items that have been identified in the 2012 report and actually things that have come up since 2012 when that report was done. There would be no changes in the site, so no site budget, remodeling, and when I say that, the drives and the parking for this particular one are actually included in the site budget for Woodview. So that's why we're at 0 down here for John Long. There is some minor remodeling within this facility, about $318,000 worth, for a total budget at John Long of about 2.7. At the high school, again, we're housing grades 9 through 12 here. The color coding is just to give you a little bit better idea of kind of the chunks that we're addressing. The green that you see, let's start on the second floor up above. As it was talked about before, your science facilities date back to 1971. So there is some reconfiguration and completely remodeling of the science facilities, all science facilities on the second floor of the facility. That's the green areas. Also, one of the other areas that was identified was tech ed. So as part of this option, you see the blue colors, the blue hatch and the blue addition out to the west here. That is addressing the tech ed needs. Basically what's happening there is the existing tech ed shops and classroom spaces are being converted into other needs for fine arts, for special needs. They have a living skills classroom in there. We're also, as part of that chunk of the project, we're creating a connection to the auditorium stage from the current auto shop, so the auto shop can be used as a scene shop. You had a beautiful auditorium. Unfortunately, things like sets get constructed on the stage. That's not typically how we would do that. We'd have a scene shop for not only creation of the scenery, but also for storage of materials and storage of costumes and those kind of things. So the auto shop would become the scene shop here. Really no work in that to do that, but we do have to create that connection to the back of the stage. The risers in the band room would get filled in this case. And that's one thing I forgot to mention back at Woodview. Your diagram does not show this, but it is happening. It is part of the budget. The music room in there, those tiers are also being filled in, so it's going to be a flat floor to alleviate that accessibility issue in there. So back to the high school. Again, the band room is being renovated as well as the tiers filled in there. Some other things that are happening are all the instrument storage and everything that's happening within that band room is being moved out into a fine arts corridor, which will be between those band and choir rooms and and what's now currently the existing shops for tech ed. That will help free up some space within those practice and rehearsal spaces. Also, as I said, mention creating some studio space, some ensemble space, as a practice room and storage space across the hallway there. In conjunction with that, you see a brand new tech ed facility out basically right behind where the district administration offices are currently. In this option, the district administration offices stay exactly where they are. So we have to create a little bit of a circulation addition to give you access to the loft, but that's being renovated and stays in place as it is. So you see a little bit of connection link there. And then basically you have a new auto shop, metal shop, and wood shop with storage mezzanines for materials, things like paint booths or finishing booths for the woods, and classrooms that are immediately adjacent to the shops, much like what auto shop has right now. So they can do classroom work and then head out into the shops for that work. So that's the dark blue. And the last piece of that is the media center at the high school is a pretty decent sized space. One end of it currently is being used as a computer lab. One of the things that Tech Ed is really expanding into is a fab lab or a fabrication lab. It's more of a clean tech thing. It's with 3D printers, kind of clean technology. The idea is that we would remodel that in conjunction with some collaboration spaces in the media center and the spaces currently adjacent to that to eliminate the need to build. At one point we actually had it shown out in the addition. We since moved that back into the building to better utilize some space in this option. The red that you have shown here, and this is an issue across the district. I didn't really mention at the other two buildings, but kitchen space for food services is an issue pretty much in every building. All the production for all your meals in the district happen at Grafton Elementary. Severely undersized to do that. So the thought is, in both of these options that we're going to be looking at tonight, the production kitchen would move to the high school here. So we're taking the space that's currently the kitchen, we're renovating that to be part of the commons as a cafe and some other spaces, but the large red addition there is the district's production kitchen. So that along with that is all the storage of foods and ingredients that come along with that, freezer cooler space, all the meal prep and all the serving space for the high school would be in that addition. And then there's also a new receiving area that's immediately adjacent to the kitchen, not only for food service, but also for just general building use. The last couple of parts here for this option, the yellow, what we're essentially doing is taking what was done in 2001, the addition of the multi-purpose room, we're turning that into the weight room with cardio fitness area. So really the only work there is to maybe put in a different floor for that space, but essentially leave it as it is, expand that space, and then what's currently the weight room would become a wrestling or multi-purpose room. Up to the top there, you see a one-station gymnasium addition to the facility. This is something that's been talked about quite a bit in the committee. This is where we ended up with that. It's really minimal seating. Again, we're talking about maybe 150 to 250 spectator seats in there. A little lobby space with additional toilet space, minor remodeling for a training room, and then also what we're talking about off the pool here is an addition of family locker rooms for that space. The whole idea behind the family locker rooms for the pool is to allow the possibility of that facility to be used more flexibly, whether it's during the day or before or after school hours. So families, seniors, people that want to come in and use the pool don't necessarily have to go into the athletic or PE locker rooms to change and go in and use the pool. So a small little addition that's going to open directly onto the pool deck would allow them to do that. Family locker rooms are actually pretty standard now for pools that are used by communities. It's much more friendly, obviously, as they're labeled to families to use those spaces. The purple, the locker rooms in this facility, we're expanding a little bit into the commons, but the majority of what's happening there is we're just basically gutting and remodeling what's there right now, updating those, redoing plumbing, redoing the lockers, making a little bit better use of space. If you've ever been back in there, especially in the boys area, it's really broken up into a lot of smaller rooms. We want to open that up a little bit more and make it a little bit more usable space for that. So moving on to the site, you see up again the budget for the Grafton High School piece of this totals about $20.6 million. Additionally, on this slide, you'll also see a couple of other budgets that didn't show up anywhere else but are important for you to understand. The first one being Grafton Elementary School. You see a demolition budget and a site budget for a total of $1.4. The demolition, obviously, as it says, as it means, it's to deconstruct what's there. The site budget is essentially to reclaim that site and add some additional parking. One of the benefits of not having Grafton Elementary School there anymore is, especially in this option, it allows you to get a lot more parking to your football, closer to your football field, a little bit better access back to there. What's shown directly behind the proposed addition for Tech Ed is actually some outdoor space for not only parking Tech Ed vehicles, but also doing outside projects for your woods and construction classes, just a little bit more ability for them to expand, which when you look at where the Tech Ed is right now, that's one of the biggest lacking features that it has right now is the wood shop is completely internal to the building. There's no outside access other than coming down a hallway. So they can't do like a mock build-up of a house or something like that. They basically have no access to outside to do that. So this takes care of that by giving them that area that's hidden behind the building, between the building and the football field. Main entry, right now everyone really does enter, not everyone, but the majority of people enter this site and enter the high school from the east side. So looking at, getting back here, I did skip over the office here. So looking at relocating the office in this case from where it currently is up by the Commons. So we're remodeling what's currently the computer lab in one of the art rooms to create that office space with the new main entry back towards the common space there. So you see the new main entry more in line with where people are coming into the building. The majority of the existing building and existing site stays as it is. District entry would still remain where it is. You see on the top there's kind of two different hatched areas for the gymnasium addition. We'll loop the road around there. And you'll notice that also this one of the things that the last referendum did was it took a lot of the woods down. And understandably, there's not an issue anymore with the village revising the tree ordinance, but we're still trying to preserve that because there was a general thought that we wanted to maybe preserve that a little bit more than cut down what's there and cut into that hill area there. What you do see though is the green hatch or the green diagonal lines there. That's alluding to the fact that if you ever in the future want to expand that to a bigger facility, you have the space to do that. So that's just kind of giving you the look if you added a gymnasium a little bit bigger than what we're in right now onto that one station gym. That's potentially where that could go. So the other couple of budgets that I missed over here for district office, there is some maintenance needs that need to happen with the HVAC and some other things with the IT area and the office spaces below. So those would be addressed. And then district maintenance facility, again, I talked about this briefly before, but here it shows up again, that $577,000 to construct the building and put it onto this site. Most likely it's going to be towards the east end of the site. That was the 3-campus option. The 2-campus option, this is, oh, thank you. I just didn't want to randomly push buttons here and turn the projector off or something like that. Thank you, Jeff. So that was a 3-campus option. The 2-campus option, as it was explained before, takes a different look at the last referendum concept. Instead of the 712, we're actually creating a 612 here. So the 2 campuses that we're considering here are the campus that we're on right now, Woodview and John Long, and the high school campus. Now, there's a little caveat to that because you see up here, and we'll talk about this in a bit, it actually still does utilize the Kennedy site in this case for district administration. That's one of those things that there's a little bit of flexibility there in terms of how the committee and how the board actually wants that to happen because the district office obviously doesn't need that whole space there. You start to question what happens to the rest of that school, and those are all great questions that I don't think the committee is completely reconciled yet, but those are some of the things that they will have to answer. So currently what we actually show Kennedy being is converted into I think it's about 7,800 square feet of that would be converted into district office space. The rest would be unused. underutilized. It could be, there's a lot of uses that we're not going to get into tonight, but there are other things that it can be used for, community uses and such. So Grafton Elementary, again, deconstruct and provide expansion space, because we're absolutely going to need that space to put the 612 on that site. Woodview Elementary becomes the new primary center for the district. So all students, early childhood, 4K and 5K, would go to that facility. Every child in the district would go to that facility if you're in those grades. John Long Middle School, the building we're in right now, would actually become the school for all 1st through 5th grade students. Every school, or every student in the district in 1st through 5th grade would come here. Grafton High School would be converted to a 6th through 12th. And some of the same concepts we were talking about last time, utilizing some shared space, adding onto the building, some of the efficiencies that come along with that in terms of operations and staffing would come along with this option. And again, we see down here our new district maintenance building, again, probably on this site someplace. So how that looks is, Kennedy isn't up here. We didn't really get into how, what spaces would become what for the district office. It is in the budget, and you'll see that in a little bit. We're just figuring that the spaces up by the current administration would be remodeled into the district administration spaces. So we move on to Woodview here. You see that there is a small addition, but right now it's just for early childhood classrooms. The good thing about this is, I know it's come up last time with, you're just building gyms. This one, because of the age of the children, they aren't going to need that additional gymnasium space. So for early childhood through kindergarten, what you have for the multi-purpose room is adequate. If you think about it just in terms of who actually goes to PE, that allows you to utilize those facilities, what you have. The other thing you'll notice here is this one actually does show the filling in the risers here, which is like I mentioned, the same in both options. But you have several cases here where 3 classrooms or 4 classrooms become 3, or 3 classrooms become 2. The kindergarten spaces are larger spaces, early childhood spaces are larger spaces than your typical classrooms. They're not as big as those really, really nice ones that you have over there right now existing. Those are very nice kindergarten rooms. So these are smaller than that. So this option accommodates early childhood, all those spaces, all the special needs. Administration, it gets remodeled in place where it's at to allow the secure entry. John Long Middle School, we did want to show this building for this option because there are several spaces like tech ed, obviously, that 1st through 5th graders aren't going to need anymore. Science classrooms that 1st through 5th graders aren't going to need anymore. So you see the extensive, not extensive, but the remodeling that takes place here. We're turning family consumer ed into some special needs areas. We're turning some of the science rooms into some additional special needs areas. The tech ed spaces get turned into classroom space. And then lastly, one of the things that is undersized there, if you imagine all your 1st through 5th graders going through lunch here, the kitchen really is too small for them to handle that student load going through there. So really the addition here is to create some additional space for serving lines, so you can have multiple lines of kids going through there at one time. The commons is a great size. That'll work fine as it is, even losing that little bit of space there. But the kitchen is really one of the issues at this facility. So in addition to the about 11,000 square feet of remodeling, we're still talking about the maintenance items. Again, there's no site budget associated with this and no additions associated with this. Very similar site diagram to the 3-campus option. Really the only difference that we're distinguishing here is the addition is smaller, but we're still dealing with the traffic problems that exist at that site by putting the additional drop-off here for Woodview, still having the bus traffic separate from the parent drop-off traffic. And again, you can see the respective budgets here again. So the 612 facility, things get shifted around a little bit. You see some similarities though. Again, we're talking about, let's start with the blue area, addressing the tech ed. The tech ed existing shops get remodeled into the same uses we were talking about before, the same fine arts and band performance and practice-based remodels that we were talking about before. But the Fab Lab concept or the computer lab concept that we were talking about in the last option really doesn't happen because in this case, the usage of tech ed actually goes up, and especially in the clean tech areas, which would be housed in that Fab Lab. So the Fab Lab is part of that addition now. The Media Center, again, is shared by all students, 6 through 12 in this facility, so we can't really afford again to rob some space from that to do some other spaces. The large orange portion here is a 2-story addition, and we'll get the second floor is on the next page. This is a 2-story addition for middle school students, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. They do have their own commons. The kitchen that we talked about before is centrally located that can serve both high school and middle school in this case. The high school offices are relocated as before, but again, we need that additional art space in this case to house the middle school students, so we can't remodel some of that space for the office. The gymnasium does need to be bigger in this case, just in terms of before, after school, during school use. You're not going to get by with just having the existing gym with the one small little gymnasium station there. So this is showing what we talked about before, the full extent of that 3-station gym. The one we were in the other option, we were giving you enough room to do someday if you ever needed to. That's actually shown as being put in place here. Same issue or same strategy before that we were talking about with the weight room and the multi-purpose room. Same strategy that we're talking about with the locker rooms, although the existing gym does have new middle school locker rooms being built here. Middle school students being separate from high school students for PE lockers especially. But for the most part, existing spaces like the fine arts, the band, the choral, the arts, the media center that we talked about, those are all being shared by all students. So 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders for those specials will be coming down here and using those facilities. There's different ways that we can approach that with scheduling and bell times and those kind of things. I will say that administration has been looking at that already, just in terms of what that even looks like and how that would operate. So it's not something that we're going into blindly saying, well, it's just going to work out. They want to make sure that they understand the administrative and operational implications of this before we ever consider going any further with this. So one other topic I do want to talk about quickly. We've gone through several iterations of this, in particular because of how this has to be built. Obviously, if you think about the last option, those additions, those remodelings can happen in ways that aren't going to disrupt students. This one, not so much. We have to get a little bit more creative on how we approach that. So it's very deliberate that we put the middle school edition up here, the tech ed edition down here, because what's going to happen is the most recent piece that was added onto Grafton Elementary, I believe was in 1963, 4, something. The 60s, kind of what completed that courtyard and closed that northeast corner of the courtyard, that would actually come down. So there's about 6 classrooms in there right now. That would come down, and the district would put portables on the site for the 2 years that this project would be going on at this particular site. So there would be certain classes that would be happening in those portables for a couple of years. Those costs for the portables, for the rental of those units, are actually included in the budget numbers that you see here. So that is taken into consideration. But what we would do is that little corner is essentially right here. So that corner would come down. That would allow us to start constructing this prior to the rest of the facility being taken down. Much like we talked about last time, there would be a transition period where there's going to be some moving around of students, so we can basically take down Grafton Elementary before the other projects are done and before the big switch happens, where all the great reconfigurations come about kind of towards the end of the project. So Large portions of these additions would be done before anything else comes down, so we can accommodate those students without having to have a greater number than 6 portables to do the project. So we're still talking about the science remodels on the second floor of the high school space, and then you see the second story of the middle school addition. This can be done in a way that allows you to expand on the second story there. You see there's kind of a blank space along the top here. There can be another wing or another addition put on up over the existing first floor without much difficulty, as long as we're planning for it. So the site looks a little bit different. You still see a large parking space or parking area out to the west end of the building here. You see kind of the relation now of the middle school addition. The kind of the back end of the tech ed area where the overhead doors are, and Carl's parking all of his cars, and you're having those outdoor projects happen. That is tucked behind the building here, but there still will be a distinctive middle school entry, a still distinctive high school entry. This time we're talking about a bus drop-off that would flow through the site, and then the majority of the parent traffic for this one would have to come in off the west end of the site here. Now, I will be upfront and say that the village has not really been thoroughly involved in all these questions that come along with site yet. I know there's several things that in the committee meeting they talked about. Well, why can't we do the addition down here? All of those constitute us having to get some changes made with the circulation that happens around this site. And obviously, we're talking about a state highway here. We're talking about village roads there. There's major impact there. So part of this that's yet to come really is how we exactly address those. So that would happen before this ever gets to the point where you're voting on it. But we're at a point tonight where we're trying to get some feedback on these, and there are still some things that need to be resolved yet as we fine tune these. Topher.
I'm Topher Adams, Director of Business Services here. First, I want to address a question some of you may have right now. Why do we have $47.3 million up there? That's the example I'm going to be presenting tonight. Once upon a time, that the 3-campus option was $47.3 million. Now, since then, we've had another committee meeting, we've had design changes, we've had changes to maintenance costs, and so that cost has come down. But I needed to get it to Baird in time for them to run the numbers to get it to us so we could present it tonight. So that's the example I'm going to use tonight, but this is not currently the cost of either plan, and again, there's still going to be revisions to these plans as we move forward and get feedback from you. So in this example, we would have a 3-phase debt issuance, the lion's share occurring in 2017 with 2 smaller debt issuances in 2018 and 2019. This debt would all be paid off by 2039. Now, if we issued $27.3 million of debt today, the interest rate on that would be about 3%. If we issued $10 million of debt today, the interest rate on that would be 2.5%. Baird used an interest rate of 4.25% in this example, basically to account for the potential or the possibility that interest rates could increase between now and when we would issue the debt. Just like a home loan, principal payments and interest payments are included. So in this example, we have interest payments of about $26.3 million. This is a chart that shows the impact of a $47.3 million referendum on taxes, on the mill rate. So in blue, that's our current debt. And you'll notice that for 2017, that impact is $1.36 per $1,000 of property value. That drops in 2018 to 63 cents per $1,000. And then by 2022, it's completely dropped off. So then we have the green bars, and that would be the new debt as a result of issuing $47.3 million in debt. So you can see in 2018, that impact would be $1.72 for a total of $2.35 in 2018. It's about 99 cents more than the debt from 2017. Now, included in those green bars, the impact to taxes, it's principal, it's interest, and it's estimated loss of state aid. So Baird runs estimates of how much aid we would lose, because as we spend additional funds, we lose state aid. That includes increased debt payments. So an increased debt payment in 2018 is going to result in lost aid. So basically what they do is they bake that into the impact on taxes, because we are going to lose state aid, and that will impact the levy. So that's included in that $1.72, and they structure the debt payments to basically keep as flat a tax impact as possible. And then you'll see that in 2022, when the old debt falls off, those principal and interest payments are increased to keep that about level. And the reason you see a slight decrease over time is that they also include as an assumption a 1% increase in property value in the district. So then that same payment from year to year going forward has less of an impact per $1,000. So what does that mean for our property tax bill? Well, I've got three different examples, but I'll go over the $150,000 home example in that first column. So our current debt, as I mentioned before, is set to drop significantly next year. That would result in a $109.50 decrease to your property tax. The new debt that would come on would result in an increase in $258 on a $150,000 home. So that would mean your tax bill next year would be $148.50 higher as a result of the debt levy than it was this past year. And if you escrow, that would be $12.38 per month increased from 2017.
So what we'd like to do is, you've sat here and listened to us and hopefully looked at the packets and so forth and heard a lot of this information, and we'd like to take questions from you. Obviously, we have a listening sheet that we've given to you that if you don't feel comfortable asking, that you can put your thoughts down and we can look at that in that sense. There's also an email that's on our district website that you can go to, that you can send an email that we can give you responses to. But we thought as we'd have Paul and Topher and Jody, myself, be up here, and you could ask questions, and one of us, if you need us to go back to a slide or whatever, then we can do that. But we have a microphone here, so we would ask that if you come up, it is directly hardwired into the sound system, so people that are watching this later can hear it, but we'd ask you to give your name and address, and then any questions you would have, we'd be happy to answer for you.
First, my name and my address. I'm on the stand. Dan Nash, 1620 North Pine Street. Okay. First of all, two comments. I was walked through the original RFP. What is going on in the school district with these buildings? This is not some kind of luxury that we need. These schools are bad. And just the infrastructure in the schools to give us heat, to give us water, to give the kids a place to go to the bathroom. This is not some kind of illusion that's being spread so that we can get new TVs or anything else like that, or make our kids smarter. There's a quality of life that is going on in these buildings, in the school district, that if you would walk through, you would not put normal people through. A prison in our state is in better shape than our schools for our kids. Now, kids and politics rhyme together so that we can get money to get what we want. But this is not an illusion. Comment two building is awesome. That's all I'm going to say. The question that I do have is the fund, I had to write this down, Fund 46. Is anything put into this referendum to continually feed Fund 46 so that we don't continue to go down this road of not having coin to go ahead and do maintenance, so we don't run into this again in 10 years since we're doing remodeling, and 20 years on the new buildings? And that is the only question that I have. Thank you.
Yeah. The referendum itself really has nothing to do with Fund 46 per se. Fund 46 is a decision that the board makes when it makes its budget every year, and as we close the budget at the end of the year. So you wouldn't necessarily have a referendum to put money into Fund 46, but the board's dedicated to putting funds away, putting funds into Fund 46 to build up that balance so that we don't have a situation 5-10 years from now, whenever, that we're having to go to referendum to do maintenance projects.
Another piece of that is that with both of these options, we are looking at reducing the schools to 4. So students are in 4 buildings, which will reduce our overhead costs with personnel for administration and support staff in that sense. It doesn't affect our staffing needs because we're still going to have the same number of students in various grade levels, so we're still going to need the same number of second grade teachers, same number of biology teachers, or whatever level you want to look at. But there are some savings that would go along that would allow us to also further fund Fund 46 or to make needed improvements that make it one of those drivers that we talked about was becoming more efficient so that we are able to meet the needs of our district, and that's what both of these options would do for us to various levels. So the question, so that it gets picked up on the camera, is about busing, and if we have issues with our busing, and if it's not meeting the needs of our parents, because it seems that more people are dropping their kids off. Is that accurate? Is that? I have not heard that. Topher and I work with the busing situation. I have not heard. I've heard people have issues with the bus company. I'm not going to say I haven't heard that, but I haven't heard that there isn't efficiencies gathered and that people are unhappy, and that's why there's more people dropping off. So that hasn't been something that I've heard, and I don't believe you have either.
No, I haven't.
As we started our year. There's efficiencies with routes that they're looking at, but nothing that would go with that.
Bob Hoffman. I live on Walters Drive in the Village. Has any consideration, I'm speaking of the 2-campus option, has any consideration made to erecting a district office building, either adjoining or attached to the maintenance building, and selling the Kennedy property? We're talking about acres of land there in prime residential area.
We've talked about multiple options as to where that district office may be, whether it's building, as you suggest, Bob, next to the maintenance building, or it is leasing space somewhere within the village. Those items were considered. We talked briefly about selling district land, any of the district land, and one of the things that was, I think, pretty resounding within the committee is that's always a challenge. is to, without knowing where the district is going to be in 30 years, and nobody's making more real estate, whether in the town or within the village, selling that land. So the initial indications within the committee is that it's not something that we'd look to first.
Hi, Joan Nash, 1620 North Pine Street. Was there any discussion on the class sizes and the goals for that? I'm not seeing, we know we have bubble classes, right? They seem to be coming every few years. I'm just wondering what the discussion was on that.
Yep, we took both of those options and worked with Hoffman with all the administrative teams. So we have high school and middle school here today, but the 3 elementary principals as well as Linda Bender in our food service. And we looked at all of those options and how does that look like? Suzanne Lilly, our special ed director, people services director, was also there. And making sure that as we look at some of these bubbles, are we creating spaces that would match the needs of all the different levels that we have at the various grade levels? And we felt confident that yes, we could. And as we're looking at those options as well, especially in the 3 campus option, the discussion was as we're building to make sure that as we're adding on, if we do have a growth, a spike, which we aren't seeing that right now, either in the village or the town with permits, but if that were to occur, that we'd be able easily to add on to it without having to develop other corridors and things like that. So that was also one of our drivers, was as we add on, to make sure we can continue to add on with a minimal cost. And so yes, that's definitely something that we've looked at all levels, and they've made changes based on that that we had.
Lisa Harbeck, 907 17th Avenue. I have a couple of questions. Are there studies that talk about the age of kids and bringing them into a high school? So this is grades 6 to 12, and I know the middle school is on the left. There are maybe, 2 areas where they might kind of intermingle. The media center, where I'm assuming they're studying and, doing IT information. So you've got, these grade 6 next to grade 12. Sometimes not a good example. I kind of worry about that. And I think there was one other area that you said that they kind of meshed.
I think there's, in that option, the specials are also a piece of that. So,
right.
As you went from a 7-12 configuration to a 6-12 configuration, the extra classrooms that you built to add 6th grade, because of the cost factor, resulted in us sharing art, us sharing music, and sharing the IMC. I think in the previous in last year's rendition, it had separate spaces. So those separate spaces were taken up by classrooms. So would they be in the art room while high school students are in there? That's possible. Kids could be doing independent study or working on a project. But that would be a possibility as you look at that option. Are there studies?
Yeah, their interaction.
I don't know. I'm guessing there are because there seems like there's studies on everything. But yeah. I'm unaware of a negative study that would come out about that. I know of other schools in our area that do have middle school students with high school students on the same campus and are able to have success.
Schools are those?
New Berlin, you think of New Berlin, both West and Eisenhower, both have 7-12 campuses that they utilize there. And they've had it for a number of years. I think almost every time since I've been in Wisconsin, they've had that. So, and they're able, they utilize that system effectively in that sense. I know, like Pewaukee has a system where their whole campus is on pre-K through seniors are on that campus. They're in different buildings, but they're all on one lot. So it's unique in that sense. That's the only district I know that has something like that. So there are people that use it and that do it well. New Berlin would look good on any standardized test or any how students are doing as they leave, not only in an academic setting but also in an extracurricular or any other way.
Yeah, I guess I'm also a little bit more worried about safety or examples. I mean, I don't know, maybe when their kids are in 6th grade, they're fine to be sitting next to a, senior. I mean, so that was my first question. My second question comment is, you're talking a little bit about you're not sure about the woodland preservation, and I think we made some changes on the Grafton board, on the village board, to accommodate for that if you needed that. I mean, there were some other concerns about that, not just for the school. And I know you're still so new to the district, but at some point in the near future, I know that we have a combination board, the school board, village board, liaison committee that hadn't really met for maybe the last 2 or 3 years, I believe. And it's, we've only met, I think, twice in the last 6 years, to be honest.
Oh.
And it's a committee that consists of a couple people on the village board and a number of people on the school board. At some point in the next 6 months, 4 to 6 months, maybe we could try to get a date together, and I think that would make everybody feel like they're working together. So.
Great. Yeah, why don't we connect? We can even connect
Yeah,
after this meeting.
sounds
and
great.
talk. Yeah, that'd be great.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for your contributions, and this program was excellent to understand what the proposals are. I'm in 1686 Willow Court. I have 3 children that are at Grafton Elementary, so this is very near and dear to my heart. What I'm concerned about, as my neighbor actually just asked about, I have 2 children that are part of bubble classes. What is the number of students you're going to have per classroom? I feel like there is not enough classroom space to combine here. We currently have 3 kindergarten classrooms at Grafton Elementary that would presumably move over to Kennedy if the 3 campus option goes through. What is that going to look like in terms of student head?
Yep, so good question, and it wouldn't be as simple as saying Grafton Elementary students would not directly go to Kennedy. That would be a redistricting piece that we'd have to look at, like what does that look like to make sure that we're able to accommodate the needs of our current students as well as anticipated growth, to make sure that we have classroom sizes that are comparable. We currently don't have classroom sizes that are comparable. We have some classrooms that would have maybe it's a first grade that maybe has 20 and 21 in one building, someone else has 18 and someone else has 25, just depending on where they live. And we run 3 shuttles because if you move into our district right now and you're in a certain grade level, let's say, Kara, can you give me a grade level that's closed? My mind's going blank. First grade at Woodview, and we've had this now recently. So you move into our district, you could live right across the street from Woodview, and because there's 25 students in each of those sections, there isn't room in the classroom, it's not going to take more than that, then you need to go to GES where they have 20 and 21, or you need to go to Kennedy where they have 22. So we bus students from various areas. We have 3 buses that run, which is about a $60,000 cost that the district absorbs by having community schools or neighborhood schools, but that really because of sizes don't allow us to have that be a neighborhood school. So what we looked at as we looked at these different options is how many students do we have at each grade level? How many students have we had at each grade level with these various bubble classes? And are we offering enough classrooms to be able to make sure that we're not adding like 32 kids or 30 kids to make this fit? And so that's how we looked at the formula as we worked with Hoffman, was looking at what are the number of students that we have, and whether there's a bubble or not a bubble, how many do we have that we would have going through to make sure we have enough space in that sense.
And then how did you address the future years of Grafton in terms of growth and population increase?
So that was one of the earlier committee meetings that we had, was looking at what are the projected growths, what's the realistic growth, how many permits have been given in the last 5 years, both in the village and in the town, what does that look like in the future, and as we look at this, we didn't underbuild, but we also didn't overbuild. We did not add extra spaces that will be sitting empty,
And that's for sure. Okay.
because that would be an overbuild, and what if the population doesn't increase? I remember working in the Franklin School District 10, 12 years ago, and thinking it was going to boom because they had sewer on the south side of Ryan Road, and then the economy tanked, and then it just never happened. So so as we looked at it, was like, but as we're building, if we do have an increase, how would we be able to add on in that sense, so that we aren't underbuilding, but we also aren't overbuilding, and we're trying to create spaces as well that are flexible, that aren't like, well, this can only be a first grade classroom, this can only be a special ed room, that could be utilized in different ways if we did have a population, just a small jump that we could use more efficiently in that way.
Okay, and then my last question is timeline in which these proposals would be built, and how long would it take to reallocate the children?
We're talking, and it's going to be dependent on which direction you choose, whether it's a 2-campus or 3-campus, because the 2-campus option obviously is going to require a little bit more phasing to make this happen. But we're talking 2 to 3 years again, much like we were with the last one, depending on which facility you're talking about. Two to 3 years. Okay. Right. If things, right now we're on track for an April referendum. So if things change, if developments happen here where that changes, that can significantly impact when you could be in these facilities. The interim plan is that the students stay where they're at until we make the big change. When all the projects are done, then the switch happens. Then the trailers that we talked about in the 2-campus option, those would be there for 2 years, 2 school years. Yeah, and thanks, Sam. Renovations are always going to be we're always going to try to accomplish those over the summer months, so there is no impact. So unless we're changing configurations or, a lot of the maintenance items, those kind of things would be taken care of over the summer hours or summer days, months.
Okay, my name is Mary Litke. My address is 1611 North Pine Street. I'm just going to reiterate just what a couple of these residents have already said. I think when it comes to classroom sizes, especially because we have 2 bubble classrooms right now, we have 7 second grade, and we have 7 sections of kindergarten. So when we look at that map, I just wonder, like, what would class sizes be then? I mean, it would be pretty high, just based on current students. I mean, I think it's something to really consider. In the 10 years that we've lived here, I've never seen 2 bubble classes in an elementary school at one time. So this is the first time it's happening, and I think Michelle has a good point. If this referendum goes through, hopefully it will, it could really generate growth to the community. So I think we have to be prepared for that. I think one of the biggest nightmares would be to build this great school and then have classes of 35. I mean, that's a nightmare for me. Like, as a teacher, I think, oh my gosh, I hope that we're building for the future. Of course, we don't want empty rooms, but right now, as is, there's 7 sections of second grade, 7 sections of kindergarten. That wouldn't really fit that well in this plan. So that's just a comment. I have a question about, so we have A and B. So are there things that we can look at? Like, I don't love district at Kennedy in Plan B, but I like Plan B better. What is the timeline in terms of when are you going to be discussing, how are you going to be giving communication to parents and to community members, and how will you decide which option you're going to, ultimately recommend?
I'll let Paul jump in after I finish. So the next step for our discussion is to take all of the communication that we hear tonight, all the communication we hear tomorrow night, all the communication that people fill out online, and send in, and share that with our Facilities Advisory Committee next Thursday. So once again, our Facilities Advisory Committee is meeting next Thursday. We'll be able to assimilate all the information that we've been given from the community, from staff, from parents, and share that with the Facilities Advisory Committee. And if there's some themes that emerge out of that that would change one or both options, then we'll be making decisions at that meeting. Do we need another meeting? Because the Facilities Advisory Committee, their goal is to make a recommendation to the school board.
Okay.
The school board can take the recommendation and revise, add, modify, delete,
Okay.
because they really hold they're your elected officials that will be bringing forward a question if they decide to do so. So
Okay.
the Facilities Advisory Committee is only making a recommendation that the board can then make a final decision on. We are really advisory only, and they make the final decision.
The only thing I would add to that is that by law, the questions for referendums have to be passed in a resolution of the board 70 days prior to the election.
Right.
So that's the timeline, and that's roughly the second meeting in January. So from the time that the committee gets done and submits its recommendation to the board will have several opportunities, and we'll take as many opportunities, I would suspect, as necessary to debate and deliberate and talk about what is best for the community from an educational perspective, from a cost perspective, and all of the elements and the issues that you raised tonight.
Okay. So not set in stone, but really a very kind of a quick timeline. So you need feedback pretty quickly.
We need
on this
feedback,
project.
we need feedback and then time to deliberate so we can call the questions or pose the questions by resolution by the end of January, yes.
Okay. And then my other comment, and it's just a concern of mine, again, I like Be Better, although there's some question in my mind in terms of a shared band and performance art, like choir, is very, very strong, both at the middle school and at the high school. They have morning choirs, they have after-school choirs. I would really have to see what that would look like and make sure that we're not losing, that we would be gaining. That would be a concern of mine. And I could go on all night. I'll just do one more, and then I'll just write down some of mine. I see there's a wrestling room, and I have absolutely no motivation for either of these. I see there's a wrestling room. I know that the dance team in Grafton for years is a really committed program. I know people in it. My daughter isn't even in it. But I know when I walk into the cafeteria of the high school and I see them practicing every day for 9 months, I think, oh, we should have a better space for them. And I look at the wrestling room and I think, could we share it? Could we build onto it? It's just a thought. Again, I have nobody in that program, but I just know that this program has been really successful here. So that's one of my other questions.
I think certainly those shared resources need to be considered. I was looking at Mr. Manti, and I've, for years and years, have seen the same thing. And why they practice, where they practice, I'm not sure. But we'll have to have a discussion of how we can best utilize the spaces reconfigured, remodeled, repurposed as best we can throughout the district. I think it's a great suggestion and a great idea for Scott to take back and noodle on.
Okay. I'll keep writing.
Bob Meyer, 1967 West Acorn, well done. It was an honor to be on the committee and put some input, and we were respectful to each other and bounced stuff out. I think we really need to do the math and say how much of this budget is actually maintenance items that have been postponed. And the first gentleman hit it right off the bat that basically the mechanicals in most of these systems are over 40 to 50 years old. They're wore out, they need to be replaced. So if we've got 35% of it going for maintenance that we deferred and the rest is for improving the quality of the education for our students, there's not a person in the room who doesn't want the best for our students. This is the Village of Grafton. We want the biggest bang for our buck. My personal opinion is I want to leave John Long Middle School a middle school. It's built as a middle school. It's quality space. Let's leave it alone. Let's put the additions on Woodview and Kennedy. Let's retweak. I'm not 100% on board with how the high school is, but I think we've got a lot of options that way, and that's the way I'd like us to go.
Thank you.
Hello, Jen Andrews. I'm a teacher, music teacher at GES. I like both plans. I don't live here, so I don't have a say that way. The only thing I wanted to say is with the option B, what I notice with my own children and kids in math and the way they trend with like advancing grades, the 6-12, I feel like that really is something that would be a great idea for education, which is our purpose. But I do have strong reservations, as Mary brought up, about the arts, and I do have to represent that. I know in talking to the music staff, there's 3 performances a year at the high school auditorium right now, and 1 here. We just were at it last weekend, many of us. That would not be, you couldn't have Into the Woods going with Beauty and the Beast at the same time. That would not work. So those are not, I know those are future things, but those matter to kids every day, so I just want to make sure those are brought up before decisions are made.
And you bring up a good point. The reason why we're meeting here tonight and not at the high school auditorium is because the musical at the high school is next week. And I was here on Sunday for the Beauty and the Beast. I will say this though, there are districts that do use an auditorium for both middle school and high school students. It may result in there being a fall play and a spring musical, or a spring play and a fall musical, in that sense, switching those things around. So it is something that can be done, and I've seen that done pretty well. But that is, so I'll put a plug in for next week's musical at the high school. If you want to go to that next week, it's supposed to be good. So that's why we're meeting here tonight.
I'm Paul Lazzari, 516 Shady Ridge Court. Probably sounds familiar to a couple of you here. I had these same comments at prior to the last referendum. I guess I don't understand. I understand how GES gets deteriorated. It's 100 years old, or whatever the heck it is. Somebody was saying that, I think it was that said that you were thinking 71 was old because that's when you were born. I graduated high school then, so imagine how
it's all
old
relative.
I am.
That's what I said at the beginning. Age is relative. I agree with that.
I guess, and I mentioned this before. At some point, I assume that when we get this allocation from the state for our annual budgets, and we divide it up, we divide it into personnel and maintenance. So there's somebody sitting at this table all the time. There's the personnel part here arguing for their cut. There apparently was nobody arguing for this side of the pot to allow these places, as the first gentleman spoke, to get to be uninhabitable. So I don't understand how we got there or how we're going to prevent getting back there if we don't address that piece. Anecdotally, I just had some service on my vehicle today, and an older gentleman said, and I don't know whether it was true or not, but I mean, the guy was 112, I think. He said he lives near a former maintenance gentleman at, I think it's Woodview, who quit after years and years of being told, oh, that maintenance money, we spent it someplace else. So that unless we can address that, I still have a problem signing on the dotted line for another, $600 or whatever a year, and that's, you're assuming, okay, is it reasonable to assume a 1% increase in my property value for the next 20-some years? I don't know. None of us really know. So that's a kind of a broad assumption. At the same time, that number is going to probably stay in the same range, but the personnel side is going to continue to increase along with that. So your total tax bill, and I'm a relatively young feller here, not in this room, but in the village. Have you seen the chart that was in the paper recently about the cost of living for seniors, for retirees? Less than 1%, and yet we're increasing their out-of-pocket expense by several percent over the years. So I guess it's more of a statement, I guess, that until we can address the lack of maintenance that allowed us to get to the point where these buildings are allegedly uninhabitable, I guess I'm not comfortable signing on to spending more money, throwing it down the same hole. And I don't know if that's something that can be answered or whether it's just left there, because...
Well, Paul, I can take a stab at that. A couple of things that I would offer. And certainly your comments are well thought out and reasonable. And what I can say, and I think as the longest serving member on the board right now, is we did have those debates on a regular basis between the person sitting at this table and the person sitting at this table. Unfortunately, program and personnel won out in most of those cases. We did continue to maintain the buildings, but even as you referred to folks in your car and these other people, preventative maintenance, ongoing maintenance doesn't prevent things from reaching end of life. And in many cases, a lot of the items that we have for maintenance now are reaching end of life, not just at GES, but roof panels throughout the district are reaching end of life. Unit ventilators in classrooms are reaching end of life. And for years, and probably and perhaps too long, we continued to maintain them, and some might argue inadequately, at a time when we should have been replacing them, but the money wasn't there necessarily to replace them. So it's a small comment right now to address that particular issue. As to the future, the things that we might be able to do to prevent this in the future, Fund 46 provides us an opportunity. That's new legislation from 2013. It allows us to put money aside, we can't touch it for 5 years, to be available to address maintenance needs that come up into the future. That's number one. Number two, a change in this go-around versus the last go-around referendum is a focus on operational efficiencies. Jeff mentioned it before. The reduction of headcount, at administrative level, we're estimating at this point preliminarily at least $200,000 a year. Does that all go into Fund 46? Does it go somewhere else? Those are things that we have to determine. Since Act 10 was passed, there have been reductions in spending. Insurance, for instance, $5.2 million. Prior to Act 10, we're now in the $3 million range. So those savings in those costs, while not necessarily being earmarked specifically to maintenance projects as much as they should have been, help slow down the increase in other areas of spending. So continued movement along that path, reductions in retirement benefits. And we made a lot of difficult choices over the last 3 to 5 years since Act 10 that have had a profound impact on the employee base, but we recognize those choices had to be made to reduce spending, to provide more money for these elements. In many cases, the items that are being addressed through the maintenance are end-of-life type things, and they need to be addressed. Some of them got addressed in 2000 with the last referendum. More need to be addressed this time around. It's an explanation of sorts to your comment and question of sorts.
And I would follow up on that it's not unique to Grafton that we're grappling with these discussions. That's why there was so many referendum questions yesterday on the ballot across the state. And it wasn't just in liberal or affluent or whatever kind of type of comment you would want to use for a community that passed. There was very conservative communities versus liberal communities that passed referendums based on need. So everyone has been placed into a spot whereby we are having to allocate our resources in that way. I think the plan that we're working on here is truly going to allow us in the future to be able to say, yeah, we have been able to long-term plan. I've spent a day in each one of our elementary schools already this year. On Friday, I'll be at the high school all day, meeting with teachers, being in their classrooms and so forth. Our classrooms are safe. Are they ideal? No, they're not ideal. But we have great learning going on because we have great teachers here. And we need to keep great teachers in our district, because if you don't keep great teachers in our district, then the quality of our schooling is going to go down and our house values will drop. And so we have to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity for students to continue to be safe in the future while also continuing to keep our best teachers in our district, because that's what we want for all of our kids. Because our kids deserve the best. They don't need the Taj Mahal, and I think what we're seeing up here is not that. I don't think either one of those options do. You know, I get them confused. The two-campus option with the middle school and high school combined had to receive some cuts with some shared things, and that's what we want feedback on because of the cost. We're trying to be fiscally responsible in that sense as well, which is why Fund 46 has been added, because a lot of districts are struggling with this and they need to build a long-term plan, and we think with our planning we're going to be able to do that. Well, it's in the two. It's in the two option. It's in the two campus option is what that's in. There's a local district that has had overcrowding, and they've had students in trailers, and so it's not a safety issue at all. And Jody, you explained the trailer issue or the trailer discussion at our last committee meeting, but there are other school districts that have done that, had to do that in our area because they've had overcrowding, and similar to like the bubble class discussions, that's how they've resolved it, by having the trailers in that sense. So I'll let Jody talk about what that looks like in that sense.
Yeah, the trailers are actually, there's bathrooms in them, all the utilities are hooked up to them, they're permanently in place for 2 years. So it's not like you're pulling up an RV and just having the kids in there. There's not only the permanent portables, but there is also usually an enclosure or connection that gets you back into the school, keeps it kids out of the weather so they're not walking through the snow or something like that. So we're not talking about putting them in the back 40. We're talking about getting them close enough where they're still safe, but they're out of the way of the construction. So it's not as bad as you might imagine. And as Jeff said, there's districts that do utilize them frequently.
Hi, Carrie Wells, 1656 Lakeshore Road. I one question and then a comment. My question was on the 3-school plan. The 4K currently, unlike other grades, there is only one section of 4K, one classroom of 4K, and I noticed on the pictures it shows that Woodview would have 2 4K classrooms and Kennedy would have 1. I was confused on how that would work, because then you would have like 4, because you have a morning and an afternoon, so you have 4 sections of 4K, and then the following year you have 3 sections of kindergarten and 3 sections of kindergarten. I wasn't sure how that would work. Meaning you would need a section of your 4K to have gone over to Kennedy for kindergarten then.
We had that discussion at the Facilities Advisory Committee meeting, that we don't need 4 4K rooms, we need 3. And so there would be students that would start at one of those buildings in 4K and would go back to their home school for kindergarten, because there isn't it'd be an overbuild. I mean, it could be a question, or it could be a comment, or I guess we've written it down now. But that's why we didn't add that in April. That's correct, right? That was a discussion that we had about that. So we were aware of that, and it was just, it's a 3 between 2, and that's why we needed it there.
Yeah, I understand that that's how the numbers work out. It just doesn't seem ideal that you would unfortunately have to have kids who maybe even have older siblings go to Woodview for just 1 year and then go back to their home school. But my comment would be, I'm definitely more in favor of B. I have seen it work in a private school. My oldest goes there, and they actually have 5th through 12th grade who share art and theater, and they actually don't have. I asked him, is there a problem with the older students? And he said, no, it's never been a problem for me. Yes, they're in the art room when I'm in the art room, but no, they don't bother me. There's never been an issue for me or anyone in my class. I said that was good to hear. I think we could eventually end up with a problem with 2 separate elementary schools that eventually, as best as we try to redistrict now and say we're making it equal at both schools, it is hard to guess what family is going to move with which age kids, that we could, within a few years, get back to, okay, well, Kennedy is full in 1st grade. You're going to have to bus those kids over to Woodview for 1st grade. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, Greg Schaefer, 2130 Yuma Street in the Village here. I'm wondering, between the 2 options that were presented today, if there's any projections on operating costs, if there's a difference between the 2 options.
Between the 2?
Yeah.
Okay, well, both go down to basically 4 schools instead of 5. Okay. Now, as Paul mentioned earlier, and I think it's a conservative estimate, we do have at least $200,000 in decreased personnel costs, going down to 4 buildings. There would also be, it should be cheaper to maintain 4 buildings. We don't have estimates on exactly how much cheaper. In addition, we would be adding currently some air conditioning. So we don't have numbers on that right now, but we do have those personnel costs.
It costs a lot of money to run facilities, and for me, it's a big deal. When you talk about the projections of financials, I mean, my comment is, it seems like a small dollar amount that I'd be willing to pay forward to the community. But the operating expenses, when you talk about operating expenses over time, that chart can change, and much like the maintenance stuff, you got to think about those options too. That would sway me with respect to what option is chosen, how much it's going to cost to run this place on a year-to-year basis.
And our discussion has been that with these 2 options, it's hard for us to get what are the energy efficiencies we're going to gain by replacing the windows at Woodview, by replacing the windows, at the high school. Because in the one option, there's only 4 buildings. In the other option, there's 4 buildings that students are in, but Kennedy is still in the mix. And so what is the savings that goes with that? And so we've had those discussions about can we look out and see what are some efficiencies that we'd receive with various exemptions you could get for lighting, for example. But some of those pieces would be determined on which option is moved forward, and then we can run some harder numbers to say this is what it would look like. We can run some harder numbers for our busing costs as well, and making sure that we're in line with that. So all those pieces would get outlined, but with 2 options, it's been more difficult. We just looked at the personnel costs, but there are some maintenance costs that would be calculated.
John Meineke, Greenfield Drive. Could you actually back the slides up 1 page? Your questions thing?
Sure.
1 more, actually. Yeah, the big drop-off from 2017 to 2018, that's the $700,000 prepayment on the loan that we're doing this year?
It's part of that. It's also part of the $800,000 defeasance from the year prior to that.
Okay.
So this is, Baird, it also includes not only that $700,000, but we are going to refund a current loan. And so Baird projected how much those new payments would be.
So we fundamentally have $700,000 extra in the budget, plus $100,000 extra in the budget this year because we're going to fund 46. Because we're making this extra payment on debt that's only 5 years to expiration is what's happening.
So we levied an extra $700,000 to prepay debt that's callable in Fund 39. That we also do have $100,000 that we're budgeting as a transfer to Fund 46.
So then you're over levying, or you're preserving the levy from last year?
Well, we can't over levy. We're not allowed to over levy within that revenue limit.
Right.
Okay.
So fundamentally, you're taking $700,000 out of your operating budget and you're dedicating it towards a debt payment.
No,
Okay.
not out of the operating budget. So Fund 39 is outside of the revenue limit. If we weren't putting it in Fund 39, then we couldn't use it in the operating budget.
Okay. Yeah, it just, again, this seems like we're getting the same answer that we got last time. And 40+ million wasn't going to fly last time. So we really got to think long and hard about this. I mean, mention something about air conditioning. For the probably 2 months out of the year that air conditioning will be used in Grafton, is there a point? I mean, realistically, high school, yeah, fine. This school, fine. Elementary schools? Yeah, fine, for 2 months out of the year. Put a fan in.
Teach in the classrooms.
Okay. That's what they do in Woodview.
Wait, John, John, I think the point, it's a fair point. The last referendum at 49.5 million, just so, you know, what we understand right now based upon increases in construction costs and increases in demand for construction services, that at a minimum those costs are going up 10% a year. And that's what we've been advised by our consultants and by the folks in the industry, at a minimum. I think yesterday there was roughly $1.4 billion of,
Yes,
throughout the state.
820 million was passed,
800
approximately.
right.
Approximately 820 million in referendum was passed.
So all of those things continue to add to cost increases. So that 49 million last year is 49 million in April is 55 million this year. And you're 100% right. Certainly one of the things that we heard at the listening session was the number was too big. And we've been working hard to provide a high quality product that meets the needs. And again, I think most have indicated that these are needs, that meets the needs at a lower cost. And if you take that 49 million or 47.5 and bump it up by that 10%, you're in the low 50s. The option now that it was presented tonight, option, at least one of them, was $44 million or 44.9. You know, so we're trying to move it in that direction. Your point is, it's a valid point, and it's a point well made, that what came out of the last referendum, Paul, your point as well, the ability to support that for the folks that live in the community, we've got to be mindful of cost. In the committee, we talk about that almost every committee meeting. How do we ensure that we are building the needs at a cost-appropriate solution? And the work's not done yet. So there are a la carte items that are being developed that would help us find ways to perhaps bring this down. And we'll continue to look at those things.
And we're intentionally, though, making sure that we aren't bringing a product that is going to result in 10 years from now coming back and saying, well, whoops, we really should have asked for this much. So we're also intentionally not doing that. So, and if you look at what referendum costs are in the various areas, it's what we're touching every building. We're touching every building. This isn't just the high school, as certain districts have done. It isn't just one school, it isn't just two schools, it's every school, and it's creating efficiencies that will allow us to be able to long-term plan, and that's been our discussion. And some of the comments that you're talking about tonight, this isn't ideal. You're right. But every time we add something, then that raises the price. So we've had to prioritize as a committee of saying, this is what we're prioritizing based on some of those drivers that I talked about earlier that will get us to the point that meet the needs of our kids and provide a quality education for them. And that's what the committee's grappling with, and people have various opinions on the committee as well. But everyone has put a lot of hours and time into trying to get something that is going to allow us to improve our facilities so that we continue to offer a great education for kids. Because for the first year, we have more kids choosing to open enroll out of our district than open enroll into our district, the first time in 5 years. And that's a concern. It's a concern for us as a district, it's a concern hopefully for you as a community, that people are seeing other communities as being better places for their kids to go to school, because we think the quality of our staff is in that same boat as other communities in our area, and that shouldn't be why people are choosing to leave our district. And so we don't want that to be a trend, we want that to be a one-year blip so that we make those decisions in that way.
Are they leaving because of the facilities, or are they leaving for another reason?
I mean, we actually have a survey that we just developed that has been sent out to all of those. That's okay. All those families that did leave us last year. I spoke with Kara this morning. I think we have like 13 or 14 people that have replied, but we just sent it out last week. So we're looking into that. Why did people leave? What were those choices? We gave them some multiple choice questions, and we also gave them some open comment questions as well. And that's data that we'll be sharing with the board once we get responses in that sense. But we've reached out for the first time to say, why are people leaving our district?
Hi, Kathy Korb, 504 Washington Street. I'm also a teacher at Woodview, and I have a daughter at the middle school. I think the biggest concern I have is John Long being an elementary school. It wasn't designed to be an elementary school. I'm concerned because most of the rooms are not being remodeled. A lot of the rooms aren't very big, and you have small kids with large desks, room needed to move. So that's one of my concerns. The other concern here is with the cafeteria area. We would have, what, 800 to 900 students in this building. With the same cafeteria area, there would be an additional lunch line, it looked like. But when you consider that many sections of kids rotating through, at Woodview, we have 3 different lunch hours just to get the kids through. So to have 30 sections of kids in this building, what would it take to get them through the lunch line? So I'm just thinking a lot of logistics and how would it work? Because it'd be great if we have these great buildings and then they're not working logistically with the students. Also, it wasn't talked about, if this is an elementary building, what are we doing for playground areas for the kids? Are we adding those? This middle paved area back here usually has traffic in it. It has buses going through for kindergarten and early childhood. So where are the kids going to play at recess time? And there would probably need to be multiple recess times because there would be multiple lunch hours. So that's a big concern. The one concern over at Woodview, and I don't see this as a luxury, is if the elementary school does end up here, we would not be putting a gym over at Woodview. We live in Wisconsin. We have how many cold days, rainy days, there's so many inclement weather days where the students cannot get their energy out. As we increase academics, we want these young kids doing more and more and more all of the time. And then when they're supposed to be playing and getting their energy out, they can't do that. And it's really hard to teach kids academically when they're kids. They're meant to run and get that energy out. How can we expect them to be doing this high-level thinking and academics if they can't get those energies out? So that is one concern over there. I think the last thing I will mention, but I too, as Mary, will have a long list of things to comment on. If this is an elementary school and Woodview is the primary school, would there be different schedules? How do we manage parents who are picking up kindergartners and an elementary student? They have to pick up over here, they have to pick up over here. There are buses going through. Has that been logistically thought out?
The last piece we have discussed, well, and we've even discussed like playground stuff. There's allocation for money for playground and equipment in both of those. So even in the other option where Kennedy would need some playground equipment moved to the south side, there's money that's allocated in the budget for that. But we have discussed the whole parking situation and transportation piece in both options because Woodview needs to be addressed currently. And if this was becoming a EC to kindergarten in this first through fifth, we have discussed what that would look like for the transportation in that sense, and making sure we have enough space and traffic pattern and so forth.
Yeah, there is going to be provided some separation of pedestrian traffic in this back area here where the buses are dropping off. So that's going to help. So parents that may be picking up have kids at both facilities, there's the opportunity to pick up at one. So you have maybe your older child walk over to the other one without crossing traffic, without ever leaving the site. So there, we have enough space here, thankfully, at this site to do some different things that'll keep kids walking and parents driving and bus traffic separate enough that it will be safe.
Because it's 3 schools worth of traffic all in one spot.
Yep.
Amanda Brennan, 1728 Cypress Drive, Grafton. I just have a quick question. I'm in total support of making our facilities better, but on the first referendum that failed, how come we had the second question about the sports facilities. How come there's nothing on this referendum to go off of that?
Yep, and the focus of the committee has totally been on the academic piece of our facilities and addressing those needs. There is work being done to look to see what are the needs. So for example, this year, our soccer field has had I think it's been 4 or 5 games that have had to be canceled or moved to another school whose field was able to be playable because there isn't drainage tiles around there. And so with where it's located, which is very great that you come around the corner and it's just this nice area here, but with the trees and the lack of wind, it doesn't dry out as well without drainage tiles. And so in the last referendum, there was a lot looked at with reorienting the field, so it'd be more ideal in that sense, moving varsity to the high school, which is probably more typical at most high schools, and some of those pieces that would go with that. So there is we're going to have data for our facilities committee at the next meeting about what are the needs, what does that price look like. Last time I think it was 1.8, so instead of saying what would be ideal, it's more saying like what do we need, even having a discussion with our facilities and grounds about, so we need to patch the track. Are there things that we could do that would give us a 5-year fix that would allow us to fundraise to make sure that we can long-term have an answer for that that would be with donors and so forth. So, but we know that there are some things that need to occur that we would, so for example, the track with a 5-year fix, we would just be fixing that out of our operating budget. That wouldn't be looking to pay take a loan for 20 years to pay for something that we're going to get rid of in 5 years. But there are other pieces with the soccer field, making it playable. Are there, is it unsafe over where we have the current softball fields? Are the fields here safe with some grading and so forth? But instead of making it an ideal setting, what do we need to make it successful?
Okay.
So the Facilities Advisory Committee is going to see some numbers. We're supposed to get those this Friday. They couldn't get them for us this week, but we did have them come in that sense. So. It is 8 o'clock. I don't want to cut people off, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we'll still be here talking. We also gave you that goldenrod sheet. If there's a box as you leave, if you want to drop that off in there, or if you want to take it online, that would be great as well. We appreciate you coming tonight and your interest and your support for our schools and for our students, and wish you all a great night. Thank you.